We go back now to Jeff Glor in St. Pete Beach for a final update on Hurricane Irma. Jeff.
Jane, it appears Irma will perform the rare feat of traveling up the entire length of the state of Florida. The southeast was preparing for the worst, but with the storm's shift to the Gulf Coast, places like Tampa and St. Pete are now more vulnerable. Right now, the Florida Keys are being hit by 130-mile-an-hour winds. More than 1 million people have lost power. Irma made landfall as a Category 4 hurricane at Cudjoe Key, not far from Key West, just after 9 this morning. More than 6 million people have been ordered to get out of its way. The hurricane's storm surge is being called dangerous and life-threatening to anyone in its path, and Naples, Florida, could see some of the worst of Irma. We're going to try to check in again now with Jonathan Vigliotti, who is there. Jonathan?
Jeff, we're in sustained winds of 40 miles per hour, expected to jump to 135 miles per hour later on today. You can see the trees blowing in this wind, and I want to point your attention over to the roof of the shelter we're staying in. It's already starting to rip off. Of course, though, it is this surge that is the real killer. 10 to 15 feet expected to sweep in. We move to higher ground to be safe, but it's really the barrier islands like Captiva and Marco Island that are expected to bear the brunt of this storm and be swallowed by that water. Jeff.
Think about that. Winds potentially going from 40 miles an hour now to 135 miles an hour. For the newest information on Irma, we're going to go to Eric Fisher, who is in New York. Eric?
Jeff, good morning. Been watching the storm now starting to slowly exit the Keys, moving off toward the north. And one thing to note about storm surge, you know that flow of wind around the hurricane counterclockwise, it actually pushes some of the water out on the west coast. We've seen that some places around Bonita Beach, Fort Myers, the water is going out. It will rush back in as the center of the hurricane passes, moves right up the coastline throughout the course of this afternoon and this evening, and a close pass with Tampa, which has not had a major hurricane directly hit the city in almost 100 years. It's a very vulnerable spot. Water can really pile in. A lot of Tampa is very low elevation, and the population has just boomed since what we've seen decades ago. And Jeff, interesting, farther inland as we look into Monday, Atlanta under a tropical storm warning for the first time. They just started those inland warnings back in 2000.
20 times as many people live in the Tampa Bay area as opposed to when they got the last hurricane in 1921. Jane, back to you.
Well, Jeff Glor in St. Pete Beach, thank you for all your help this morning. Stay safe.